What if the world economy shattered again? This time in a way no model, no central bank, and no predictive algorithm could contain. Imagine a sudden fracture racing through global credit markets, triggering a chain reaction across supply chain, commodities, and sovereign debt. Within hours, the familiar structure of the global economy begins to distort, revealing a landscape shaped by volatility rather than stability. Forecasting frameworks fail, confidence evaporates, and a new unsettling question takes hold across every financial center on Earth. Are we witnessing the collapse of the system or the birth of something entirely different? In this alternate economy, the first signals arrive quietly. Unexpected liquidity shortages, irregular price movements, AI trading systems contradicting one another. But soon, the disturbance grows louder. Governments scramble for clarity while megacorporations with immense control over logistics, data, and AI infrastructure recognize that the equilibrium has fractured. The world economy enters a zone where traditional logic no longer applies, a speculative scenario that feels less like fiction and more like an inevitable evolution of global fragility. Maybe this future is closer to reality than it seems. As markets convulse, households feel the tremors in real time. Unstable prices, disrupted supplies, unfamiliar risks creeping into everyday decisions. The old rhythm of growth and contraction no longer guides expectations. A deeper tension forms, one that hints at structural change, at a global system forced into transformation by pressures it can no longer absorb. What you are about to see may change the way you understand the future of the world economy. AI-driven financial networks attempt to stabilize the turbulence, but their predictions drift apart, revealing the limits of automated foresight in a world losing coherence. Governments deploy emergency tools, yet the ground beneath them keeps shifting. This is not a repeat of crises past. This is a transition into a new economic terrain defined by uncertainty, power realignment, and the rise of actors capable of exploiting systemic collapse to redraw geopolitical influence. Stay with me until the end of the simulation. Because once the first cracks appear, the entire timeline begins to shift in ways few imagined, but many feared. And it is exactly here, in this moment of rupture and accelerating tension, that this alternate timeline begins to take shape. As the shock deepens, the early years of this alternate future begin to unfold with an uneasy clarity. Markets that once moved with predictable patterns now behave like unstable systems trapped between human fear and algorithmic overreaction. Households adjust to a new rhythm of volatility, learning to navigate a world where prices fluctuate without warning and employment becomes a shifting landscape shaped by automation, uncertainty, and the silent advance of AI-driven decision-making. What once felt like a temporary disturbance now resembles the opening chapter of a structural transformation, one capable of redefining global power, national priorities, and the very meaning of economic security. In moments like this, it becomes clear why these simulations matter. They reveal the hidden pressures shaping the global economy, the fragile connections that hold it together, and the futures that could emerge if just one critical variable shifts. If any part of the scenario resonates with you, if it feels plausible, unsettling, or strangely familiar, your voice helps expand the conversation. If this made sense to you, talk to me in the comments. Tell me what caught your attention the most so far. Your participation shows that this type of analysis matters, that there is a community willing to explore complex scenarios and think beyond the obvious. And if this exploration of alternate economy paths is valuable to you, leaving a like or even joining the channel helps this kind of work reach more people who seek deeper, more realistic future predictions. But our simulation doesn't pause here, because as the crisis evolves, the world begins to reorganize itself. Governments searching for control, megacorporations expanding their influence, and AI systems becoming silent arbiters of what comes next. And it's within this shifting terrain that the true transformation of the timeline begins to reveal itself. In the early years of this new timeline, the global economy enters a state of continuous oscillation. Energy prices soar unpredictably, creating successive waves of inflation that affect everything from basic foodstuffs to essential technologies. Labor markets rapidly fragment. Some professions disappear while others are absorbed by automated systems that expand not out of efficiency, but out of sheer necessity. Households struggle to adapt to a volatile cost of living, calculating each choice with a mixture of caution and urgency. Global trade shrinks at its fastest pace, since the mid-20th century, and each country tries to protect what little it still controls. In this scenario, markets move between panic and forced adaptation, exposing fragility that has always been hidden beneath decades of artificial growth. Over the following years, governments and central banks realize that traditional measures no longer work. Monetary policies lose their impact. Fiscal stimulus generates only temporary relief. It is in this vacuum that megacorporations expand their reach, offering infrastructure, logistics, and AI systems capable of stabilizing small sections of the collapsing economy. Some nations voluntarily submit to these private networks. Others resist, fearing the loss of sovereignty. Meanwhile, emergency digital currencies emerge as makeshift solutions, attempting to keep the flow of payment alive in regions facing severe instability. The line separating the state and megacorporation begins to disappear, inaugurating a period in which power and technology become irreversibly intertwined. As the decade progresses and the cumulative effects of this crisis reshape the planet, a global reconfiguration becomes inevitable. Traditional alliances weaken, replaced by new economic blocs defined not by geography, but by access to data, energy, and artificial intelligence. Entire regions reorganize their priorities, seeking stability in decentralized networks or in pacts led by AI superpowers capable of predicting risks and adjusting the economy in near real time. Now I want to delve even deeper into the scenario. As these blocks consolidate, two extreme trajectories begin to emerge. At one extreme, an abundance economy emerges, driven by efficient automation, international coordination, and AI systems that reduce waste and redistribute resources with unprecedented precision. In this model, societies achieve unprecedented levels of stability and prosperity. At the other extreme, a concentration economy forms, where control of critical infrastructure is concentrated in a few entities capable of shaping national decisions and influencing collective behavior. Inequality intensifies, and social mobility becomes a rare privilege, reserved for those aligned with the new power structures. Over time, the social impacts become profound. Human routines are transformed, purpose is fragmented, and collective identity undergoes a period of redefinition. People question the role of work in a world dominated by automation. Entire communities rethink values, expectations, and the very notion of stability. Amidst these changes, society's emotional journey reveals hidden truths about technological dependence, psychological fragility, and the invisible cost of living in a system that no longer responds to principles that originated it. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. In the years following the initial shock, between the third and seventh years of this alternate timeline, governments and central banks realized that the financial system they knew no longer responds to traditional stimuli. The abrupt fall in international confidence erodes credit mechanisms, and states begin launching emergency digital currencies to prevent payment systems from collapsing completely. These emergency currencies act as makeshift bridges between fragmented economies, sustaining only the essentials and revealing, behind the scenes of this future, how vulnerable the global financial architecture has always been. At the same time, megacorporations advance quietly, consolidating logistics, food, energy, and AI infrastructure, sectors that become the backbone of this new order and formation. The concentration of power grows as an inevitable consequence of a world seeking stability at any cost. As these critical years pass, regulatory frameworks become more rigid, attempting to contain the advance and influence of these private entities. But the more the state tightens its grip, the more corporate networks adapt, expanding their presence through private AI networks capable of operating beyond the reach of traditional monitoring. These networks begin to offer something that governments can no longer provide: functional economic forecasts, real-time simulations, and the promise of control over chaos. A hybrid order emerges where states and corporations compete not for territory, but for the ability to interpret the economy before it moves. Now I want to delve even deeper into the scenario, because it is at this point that the world begins to reorganize itself irreversibly. As this new order stabilizes over the course of the decade, geopolitics is reconfigured. The old division between East and West loses strength, replaced by power blocks defined by access to data flows, autonomous artificial intelligence, and strategic reserves of critical technology and minerals. Countries that dominate these elements emerge as AI superpowers, capable of influencing global decisions without triggering a single military conflict. Others align themselves with transnational corporate networks, accepting to lose part of their sovereignty in exchange for economic predictability. This reorganization gives rise to two extreme scenarios that begin to compete for the future. In the first scenario, an abundance economy begins to take shape. The integration of automation, international coordination, and high-precision algorithms reduces waste, optimizes production, and creates an environment of relative stability. Resources become more accessible, inequalities decrease, and the collective mindset shifts towards reconstruction. In the second scenario, however, a concentration economy consolidates. Here, a few entities control the vital flows of the global system: energy, data, logistics, and the AI platforms that dictate market behavior. Inequality becomes entrenched, social mobility stagnates, and critical decisions cease to be human, becoming automated responses to simulation models whose workings few truly understand. When this new order becomes part of everyday life, profound impacts on society begin to emerge. Routines are reconfigured by intelligent systems that guide individual decisions. Work loses its original meaning, leaving millions searching for purpose in a world where efficiency trumps identity. The human journey undergoes a silent transformation. New beliefs emerge, old value structures crumble, and each person tries to find meaning amidst realities that change faster than the time needed to understand them. The hidden truth of this future is that technology, far from completely liberating humanity, demands a new psychological, emotional, and cultural adaptation, something that no economic model could accurately predict. Comment below, that makes sense to me. Throughout the 7th to 15th year of this alternate timeline, the world undergoes a silent yet profound transformation. As old political structures lose stability, nations begin to cluster into new economic blocs that are not bound by geographical borders, but rather by access to data, artificial intelligence, and critical minerals. This movement redefines alliances that seemed unbreakable and exposes a hidden truth that global power has always depended less on territorial size and more on the ability to control invisible flows. Traditional superpowers see their influence gradually dissolve as coalitions guided by AI-driven economic models emerge, capable of predicting imbalances, anticipating disruptions, and manipulating the direction of world trade in real time. Thus, the axis of power shift to entities, be they states, corporations, or hybrids, that can simulate the future before it happens. Behind the scenes of this future, governments realize they have lost their monopoly on strategic information. Private economic forecasting networks, fueled by colossal amounts of data, are beginning a silent battle to determine which nations will be protected from regional collapses and which will face inevitable instability. Now I want to delve even deeper into this scenario, because this period marks the moment when the global economy definitively abandons its traditional principles and enters an era governed by predictive capacity, not military force. Wars cease to be fought with weapons. They are fought with simulation models, infrastructure control, and invisible decisions capable of moving entire markets with a single algorithmic alteration. When this new order stabilizes, two extreme paths emerge as possible destinations. In one, the abundance economy becomes a reality. Cooperative blocs share data, eliminate redundancies, reduce waste, and coordinate global production in an optimized way. Artificial intelligence works to increase efficiency and expand access to essential resources, generating an era of relative stability and expanding collective well-being. In this scenario, the collective mentality evolves into a perception of shared responsibility and interdependence. On the opposite path, however, a concentration economy is born. Here, a few blocs and corporations control the central nodes of logistics, energy, and data processing. Inequality deepens as decisions affecting billions are made by algorithms whose logic remains inaccessible to the public. Smaller states become dependent on larger structures, and entire societies begin to live within systems that dictate everything from prices to individual economic behaviors. As this critical decade progresses, the social impacts become impossible to ignore. The human journey is profoundly altered. Traditional professions disappear, new ones emerge at a pace that education cannot keep up with, and people's routines are guided by recommendation dashboards that translate the economy into daily choices. The feeling of autonomy diminishes as many seek a new purpose amidst a hyper-optimized, yet emotionally draining order. Cultural transformation becomes evident. Values shift, expectations are reconfigured, and collective identity oscillates between adaptation and resistance. At the heart of this transition, a silent question begins to take shape. How much of our humanity can remain intact in a system that anticipates our decisions before we even make them? Comment below. That makes sense to me. In the early years following the global reconfiguration, the world economy began operating under two possible narratives, each shaped by decisions made amidst the initial chaos. The impact of these formative years reveals that the direction of the system depends not only on technology, but also on the collective mindset that emerges in the face of instability. As old institutions struggle to regain relevance, governments attempt to adjust monetary and fiscal policies, while megacorporations quietly expand their reach, filling gaps left by weakened states. Critical infrastructures, energy, data, logistics, are rebuilt by hybrid networks that unite public and private interests, but this fusion also exposes a hidden truth. Whoever controls predictability controls the future. As the decade progresses, newly formed economic blocs begin to define their priorities. Some invest in collaborative systems based on distributed artificial intelligence, seeking stability through global synchronization. Others consolidate power in highly centralized structures, betting on the ability to predict and manipulate markets even before a crisis manifests. Now I want to delve even deeper into the scenario, because it is during this period that two extreme paths emerge, each carrying promises and risks that reverberate throughout the human journey. In a distributed abundance scenario, AI-driven economies are able to stabilize production and reduce waste on an unprecedented scale. Automation optimizes supply chains, adjusts supply and demand almost instantly, and creates resilient systems capable of absorbing shocks before they reach the public. Costs fall, resources become more accessible, and wealth distribution gradually balances. Governments cooperate at an unprecedented level, sharing data and algorithms to align economic strategies. Society experiences a transformation marked by a sense of reconstruction. New opportunities arise, and the prospect of predictable future restores people's confidence. This model requires coordination, transparency, and a constant decision to prioritize collective stability over individual power. At the opposite extreme, the concentrated control scenario emerges as a rigid and highly hierarchical architecture. Here, predictive AI and megacorporations merge, forming superstructures capable of influencing global markets, determining access to resources, and shaping political decisions. Social mobility becomes dependent on integration with these dominant networks. Collapse ceases to be an accident and becomes a strategic tool, an influence mechanism used to reallocate power, neutralize rivals, or consolidate territorial and digital control. The population lives under systems that anticipate their behavior, defining opportunities based on algorithmic models that few understand. The emotional impact of the scenario is profound. Individuals feel observed, guided, and often replaceable. When this new order stabilizes, the consequences for human identity become impossible to ignore. Daily routines are shaped by intelligent systems that guide everything from financial choices to consumption habits. Purpose, once anchored in work and autonomy, undergoes a forced transformation. Many question their role in a world where predictability surpasses creativity. The individual journey becomes a search for meaning amidst structures that promise security but demand conformity. And as people try to understand what it truly means to live under these two possible realities, a silent revelation begins to emerge. Perhaps the greatest struggle of the future will not be economic, but existential. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. In the early years, as these extreme scenarios begin to materialize, the human impact becomes more evident than any economic indicator. Work, previously structured around clear roles and repeatable tasks, is redefined by AI systems that adjust activities in real time, shaping each function to the changing needs of the economy. Traditional professions dissolve as new roles emerge, many of them hybrid, demanding a capacity for constant adaptation. This process creates a collective sense of permanent transition, as if the whole society were crossing a bridge that is never finished being built. Over the course of the decade, this structural change transforms not only the economy, but also how people perceive their own value and purpose. Governments attempt to present these developments as inevitable advancements, promising efficiency and stability amidst uncertainty. Megacorporations reinforce this narrative, offering platforms that promise to facilitate daily life, even as they silently encroach upon individual decisions previously guided by intuition and personal experience. Behind the scenes of this future, a growing unease emerges. The suspicion that human autonomy is being sacrificed in the name of a more predictable order. Society is beginning to divide between those who completely surrender to recommendation and simulation systems, trusting that algorithms know their needs better than they do, and those who resist, try and preserve the unpredictability that has always been part of the human journey. Now I want to delve even deeper into this scenario, because this division isn't just technological, it's cultural, psychological, and above all, existential. As one part of the population adapts to lives entirely mediated by AI, another part begins to question whether economic freedom is still possible in an environment where every choice seems pre-calculated. This tension creates new subcultures, new social movements, and new forms of silent resistance. Some see automation as a path to abundance. Others see it as a threat to the essence of humanity. And as these perceptions intensify, the hidden truth is revealed. The battle is not between humans and machines, but between two visions of the future that shape the collective mindset in opposite directions. When this new order stabilizes, the impact on identity becomes inevitable. Routine ceases to be guided by time and becomes guided by efficiency metrics. Relationships change, culture fragments, and the concept of purpose needs to be rebuilt almost from scratch. In a world optimized by machines, the question that silently resonates in all social strata is simple, yet devastating. What does it mean to be free when even our most intimate decisions are predicted before they exist? Comment below, that makes sense to me. As this timeline progressed and the early years of instability gave way to a completely reshaped economic structure, it became clear that the crisis had not only strained the system, it had transformed it into something unrecognizable. Governments, central banks, and megacorporations, which had previously reacted in a disorganized manner, began to operate within a hybrid architecture that blended state authority, autonomous algorithms, and decisions made behind the scenes of this future, where predictions carried more weight than laws. Over the course of the decade, this new configuration began to stabilize parts of the world while plunging others into a permanent state of adaptation, forcing entire nations to reconsider their role within a system that no longer functioned according to traditional market principles. The global reconfiguration that emerged from this process dismantled historical blocks and gave rise to alliances shaped by access to data, AI networks, and strategic reserves of critical minerals. States that dominated these infrastructures became gravitational centers of this new order, while those left behind faced a future of profound dependence. Over time, two trajectories stood out as dominant forces. In one, the promise of the abundance economy emerged. Optimized production chains, minimal waste, wealth distributed more equitably, and a collective feeling that the crisis had been a bridge to a more rational and predictable future. In the other, the concentration economy consolidated, where power, resources, and decisions were filtered through a few entities capable of anticipating and manipulating global events before they became visible to the public. Now I want to delve even deeper into this scenario, because it is in this contrast that the true nature of this transformation is revealed. When this new order stabilizes, the impacts on society go beyond the economy. The human journey shifts. Routines become mediated by systems that guide behavior, choices, and even ambitions. Work, once the basis of identity, becomes a fluid function, adapted to algorithms that change according to the needs of the moment. Culture fragments between those who fully trust in simulation and those who seek to preserve unpredictability as a form of freedom. The hidden truth of this future is that the crisis has not only reshaped institutions, it has redesigned the very notion of stability, creating a world where security and control go hand in hand with surveillance and technological dependence. And while humanity tries to understand its place within this new reality, a silent question begins to gain strength, crossing borders, classes, and ideologies. Who is really in control, us or the system we created? Comment below. I'm on this journey too. If you've made it this far, it's because this journey through possible futures has truly resonated with you. And that's precisely why this channel exists, to explore, without haste and without superficiality, every layer of the scenarios that could shape tomorrow. Here, we look at the global economy not as a set of static graphs, but as a living organism full of uncertainties, tensions, disruptions, and alternative paths. If this kind of deep, serious, and speculative analysis makes sense to you, subscribing to the channel is the best way to continue building the space dedicated to what if economy, future predictions, and simulations that challenge everything we thought we knew about the economic future. And if the simulation made you think at all, leave a simple sentence in the comments, just so I know you were with me until the very last second. I'm with you until the end. This small gesture helps show that there's a growing community interested in exploring these hidden futures. And a like also makes a difference. It brings this content to more people who, like you, want to understand the behind-the-scenes aspects of the possible realities that are approaching. And if you want to continue this journey now, you don't have to stop here. There's another simulation right next door, directly connected to this timeline. There's another simulation right here that connects directly with this one. Click and keep going with me there.